Okay, I've got a question for you. Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat at 5 a.m. with the intrusive thought, hey, I wonder what would happen if Snorlax fought Pikachu? But, what if Snorlax was part Sarlacc and had a toothy torso with tendrils and tentacles? No? Well, that, my friend, is why I am here. And welcome back to the East Coast. Truth be told, I wasn't thinking about the Sarlacc at all when I began this project. I was 100% thinking about the thing where Norris Thing chest opened up to show off his big British smile. And here we are. Today we're starting with Snorlax's body, which will be hollow, and so I'm going to ball up my finest brown paper bag as the core, which I can then wrap in a layer of aluminium foil for rigidity. I'll then edit on the first layer of clay and use a circular cutter to cut out the mouth hole. I can then take my Black Falcon 2.0 to scrape away what I do not need, leaving me a nice big circular mouth. And as I'm nothing if not a sucker for excess, I'll use a knife from my Michael Myers collection to score the base body to make it super extra grippy for the next layer of clay to adhere to. And now it's time for our first bake of the day, and we're left with a very convincing ballsack. With that baked, I attempted to remove the innards with Baby Bird, but alas, I was left wanting, and therefore called upon the pterodactyl for extraction. And on a side note, as a dinosaur nerd, it is truly staggering how many people don't know how to spell pterodactyl. Try it yourself. Leave your first guess in the comments section without Googling it or looking at other answers. I believe in you. But not really. I don't even know you. With a couple of holes drilled for the legs, I thought it a stroke of divine genius to incorporate the leg armature and the tentacle armature as a single piece. As with all genius, this was not without consequence, and the hip cracked off like a fragile 80-year-old with weak bones and poor navigation of stairs. But not to worry, as a clay enthusiast, I'll patch that up with, say it with me kids, excess! And after a quick bake, we can start lathering up this coin purse with some bacon bond. With Sir Scroats adequately sticky, I can roll out a sausage for some Jessica Rabbit lips, which I bisect down the center and wrap around the open hole, before adding the subsequent top coat for Snorlax's main body. I'll add multiple layers here, trying my best to release any air pockets between the layers to prevent cracking, and I'll add the head and the ears, which I'll call proxy, as at this stage I just want to get things in place so I'm not too worried about the specifics. I'll also delineate the areas of the face that indicate a change in colour and sketch on the eyes and the mouth. It was at this point my wonderful fiancé would tell me that he looks Asian, and I had to explain to her where Pokemon come from, and, consequently, why the wedding is off. I'll scoop out the inner ears for better audio faculty and refine the facial separation with a medium silicone shaper. I can from here twist a looped scraping tool into each eye socket before adding a couple of pre-baked orbs and his eyelids, and then blend that all into the face. I start the rough blending with a ball stylus, and then I finish it off with a silicone shaper. I can then add a couple of pre-baked tusks and a stiff bottom lip, which I think is quite fitting, as Snorlax seems the antithesis of stoicism, represented by a stiff upper lip. Within this gummy region, I wanted to add teeth that I don't have to paint, which brings me to this translucent clay that I purchased about a year ago. Now somehow it was crumbly and completely unworkable in a way that I've never come across before. Does Scopy Primo dry out over time? And after a quick Google search, this clay is officially on par with my self-respect. What happened to them? In any case, I had to pivot to a white Primo, and I went with a shark-shaped tooth as opposed to a fang because, Norris thing. Remember? Now, based on the beloved cartoons, Snorlax always appeared smooth.
Dolphins.
But then I remembered that there was a little movie called Detective Pikachu that starred Deadpool, and this showed Snorlax as furry. So I guess we're doing fur again. And I guess the cat's out of the bag now, because you just watched me make a whole lot of furry lines at random with the cap of a pen. And after that I used a firm shaper to frame the face, and then after that I carved in the creases of the lips. This worked out a lot better on my Stitch model because he was a lot bigger, so if you haven't already, go check that video out. I'll link it somewhere on the screen, potentially, because I'm not sure how to do that. I can press in a couple of receiving divots for future arms and get onto an alcohol rub. To add some extra furry details to the fur, I'll use a stiff hog hair brush, which looks good in person, but you're as likely to catch it on camera as you're likely to ever enjoy a Katy Perry song again.
Because I had no clue that one day I would decide to sing a little bit of that in space.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
And he's off to the oven to avoid any future smooshing, and I'll roll out un sausage and cut it down the center for equal-sized arms. I simply press these into place as the furry texture double as something for the uncured clay to grip onto. The arms get furred up just like mine, and then we can make some itty-bitty hand and foot claws. The end of the arm stumps get some receiving holes with which we can insert our lazy boy's claws. The feet here are two simple balls that I can push onto the metal armature stump we prepared earlier. I'll use a small timber dowel in this instance to fur up the feet, and then I can insert the toe claws in the same way that we did the hands, before moving on to shaking some aluminium foil vigorously to make a tiny electric mouse torso to ensnare in the tentacles. I can go ahead and position the tentacles in an adequately sinister pose, making sure to use the bottom tentacle for stability and effectively turning Snorlax into a sneaky tripod. It's then time for a quick bacon prime. I used my Citadel white spray primer this week as I just couldn't bear the thought of priming fur by hand. So like and subscribe if you like seeing my slow descent into hobby-related bankruptcy.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
And you can see here that whilst I was talking, I made a demonstration Pikachu head, then, through sleight of hand, swapped it out for a practice head I had already made off camera that I was very happy with. That is correct, dear viewer. You have been victim of a great deceit, and I feel nothing. This is the true reason Pikachu looked so shocked. After stewing in unwarranted levels of pride for some time, I add Pikachu's little button nose and give him a backbone, or spine if you will. I can add a couple of ears and bend one of them for a bit of character before adding some pre-baked eyeballs. Though these eyes were a bit smaller than I had wanted as I'm going for an over-the-top shocked face. I'll remove these and add some bigger ones, all the better to see his impending doom. Oh no! Oh no! The head gets a basic furry wipe down, and then I can put him aside for a while and I can move on to the flesh for the mouth. In the biz, we call that flawless editing. I'll firstly goop up the innards of the torso mouth, then apply the pink inner cheeks? And extend these over the lips to act as gums that will, at some stage, get a terrifying circle of teeth that we made earlier. But first, we'll need to cover the tentacles in some pink clay, do a test fit of Pikachu to make sure both combatants address each other, and I can proceed to making that lightning tail. I firstly sketch out a tail that is far too big, then I sketch out a second smaller tail that I can shape a piece of armature wire atop of. I'll press this into a flat piece of Sculpey Primo, cover the wire, admire my work, and move on to painting. This is masking fluid. Now what masking fluid does is it masks things with fluid, and I'll use it to paint over Pikachu's black eyes for protection, because I can then paint the head a bright sun yellow without worrying about painting the eyes. Then I'll move on to painting the tail and finally the torso. You can see that I textured the torso with a knurling of my sculpting tool so that the tentacles have something to grip onto later. Speaking of said tentacles, as the clay was just kind of mashed into the mouth, I'll come back with a silicone tool that has a sharp, squared off head to impress in the separation between the tentacles. And now it's time to add the gnarly teeth. Now, I've seen multiple sculptors on YouTube do this, and I can say with the gift of hindsight that it worked a treat. Firstly, you take a selection of pre-baked teeth. Secondly, you press them into the position around the mouth in the still soft clay. My gums in this case are a combination of white primo and red souffle, and with a full set of vicious dentures, add any remaining details needed, and then send it off to bake. For the next step, you take a circular dish of any kind. Mine is the lid off a green curry from the Thai box in Christchurch, and I lay down some masking tape, sticky side up, and be sure to mark the top as your starting point, and then begin to remove the teeth in order, and we can put them aside until everything else is painted. Bada boom! Next up on our to-do list are Pikachu's little legs, which I'm making out of white primo to make painting easier later. I make a little symmetrical boomerang and I press in a couple of little Pikatoes before separating the left and the right legs with a straight blade and pressing them onto the body. It's then time to remove the masking fluid from Pikachu's nose and eyes, and you can see that the fluid did take some paint with it, but we can just touch that up later. After baking, Primo has this tendency to lose its shine, and so I usually go back over the black clay with a quick paint or a wash to liven it up a little bit. And so I will paint the black eyes black, I will paint the black tips of the ears black, and who is Pikachu without his trademark rosy cheeks? So manly, so demure, such wow. Finally, the mouth gets a pink coat and we can move on to assembly. I'll stick the head and the tail in place with a mystery substance. The head goes in a previously drilled head hole, and as for the tail, I'm not overly concerned with how this connection looks because I'm just going to be covering it up later. And to achieve said cover-up, I'll use my clay extruder to make an extra long noodle of clay that I can wrap around our helpless hero. I'll then realize that their proportion is significantly smaller than the rest, rip it all off, and repeat the process with a larger diameter stencil. And with that little error addressed and fixed, I'll texture up the tentacles a wee bit, off to the oven for a final bake, and we can get on to the painting. I'll start with a bone white for Snorlax's lighter belly segments. I'll add a pink around the lips for some reason. And once the lips are done, I can paint his face, and when his face is painted, I can paint his feet. I've made a dark red wash for the obvious gummy threat, but I won't be washing or glazing anything else in this model, as I want it to be as true to the cartoon as possible, and that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that it's already Friday, and this video goes out in about 6 hours, and I haven't even started recording my voiceover yet. And with that 100% truthful statement out in the open, I wash the tentacles and use a sponge to dab away the excess where pooling has inevitably occurred. For Snorlax's fur, luckily enough, I made this exact same blue from my Shark of Blue Shoes video, so I just had to watch that again, as retaining incidental information along with a tolerance for young people is something that you tend to lose as you get older. In order to make said blue, I'm using all the cheap acrylics. I start with a white and a black mixture for, you guessed it, grey! Then add some ultramarine blue and a cool blue. The bottle actually says this, but either that's a typo or beyond my skills as a human being that uses my mouth to produce words. And with Snorlax sufficiently blued up, I will glue in the much anticipated teeth. And I'm happy to say this was far more enjoyable process than painting the mouth than fixing the teeth afterward. That said, it was an absolute nightmare to film, so I didn't actually get to do anything cool with the editing insofar as time lapses or stop frame, but you know what? We're almost 15 minutes into this video. It's too late for you to back out now. Save that for the glamour shots. I see you 85%ers that leave as soon as the glamour shots roll on. I see you. Now, I am aware that I did say I wasn't going to do anything with Pikachu's tail, but as a purist, there was too much of it exposed, so I had to add the brown. And with that, dear viewer, our time together is coming to an end. All I'm going to do now is varnish up all the goopy bits and make them look extra shiny and extra wet, and then it's time for these two to battle. But I think we know the outcome.
Pikachu, I choose you!
As always, a big old thank you to everybody who came along for the journey today. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. And as always, go make a mess.